Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Center for Private Sector Engagement, I welcome you all to this public-private dialogue which is basically meant to discuss pre-budget proposals and better business regulations, specifically for the Sindh province. Budget 2021 is around the corner, and we really hope that our budget making process becomes inclusive, and of course this will help us to develop in a sustainable manner. And in this regard, the federal governments and the provincial governments have sent out the call for proposals, and several of the organizations that are being represented here are also developing proposals. SDPI is a premier think tank, and our executive director is part of the Economic Advisory Council, which was just formed a couple of days back. So we have been asked to gather some of the proposals that are practically implementable, and in order to gather these proposals, we have three main objectives for the meeting today. Number one, we want to get some inputs from the private sector and the government on what help they can be provided from the PSDP and the ADP side. Number two are meaningful proposals for ease of doing business, especially in the Sindh province and in Pakistan in general. And number three are proposals to make the incentive schemes introduced, especially with regards to COVID, by the State Bank of Pakistan and SMETA, and how we can make these schemes more inclusive, make the stakeholders more aware about these schemes. And so these will be majorly discussed today. For this meeting, we are collaborating with Sukkur IBA University, and this meeting has only been possible with their support. So I would really like to thank Dr. Akram, who is also with me in Sukkur at the moment. So just to roll things off, I would request Dr. Akram, Joint Executive Director of SDPI, to give his welcome remarks, and then we will start the meeting.
Thank you, Ahad, for this introduction. Let me start by thanking the senior management at IBA Sukkur and the team on taking this initiative. I'm also thankful to the esteemed guests whom I see in the audience list, including the Sindh Revenue Board, ACCA, and several other colleagues who continue to work in this endeavor. Last month, when we discussed this subject, we were mindful that both institutions, IBA Sukkur and SDPI, continue to work on budget, tax, and trade policy reforms. And it is important now to join hands and form a research and advocacy partnership where like-minded institutions can ensure follow-up of their research. I'm also honored here to introduce that SDPI's national network of economic think tanks has participation from several policy think tanks across the country, including all provinces. So today's message is being seen in all provinces and reputed institutions, including IIM Sciences Peshawar, LUMS in Lahore, PITE in Islamabad, National Textile University in Faisalabad, and several others. Now, as Ahad rightly pointed out, that we come here to discuss primarily, of course, the upcoming budget. And given that there are important challenges to address amid COVID-19, and how, of course, the tax regime at the federal level, at the provincial level, can help mitigate some of the challenges being faced by the businesses here. But equally important is to look at the regulatory burden and how that can be reduced during the pandemic times, particularly looking at how the federal level trade policy could help the businesses in Sindh, how Sindh province's industrial policy, how Sindh's SME policy could help the businesses during these difficult times. Also important to look at the post-pandemic economic recovery and the several scenarios of post-pandemic economic recovery. We are mindful that there are some things on which we can capitalize. We have seen a revival of exports in recent months. There is greater interest now in CPEC and special economic zones, and how can the Sindh province aim to capitalize on some of these opportunities is something which we would like to learn from all of you today and discuss with you. And while we continue to conduct research on the desired budgetary reforms, trade reforms for SMEs, equally important is to be mindful that there are some elements which remain excluded in this dialogue. So it's important to have a very inclusive public-private dialogue on these matters. And this inclusive dialogue is important, as in the past, pre-budget meetings, pre-budget seminars have been known to carry messages from only the stronger voices. And the voices of MSMEs, the voices of startups, voices of women-led enterprises were probably not conveyed very strongly in such pre-budget meetings. So this effort by IBA Sukkur is commendable, because I can see that it brings together even the small chambers as well as smaller business associations whose voices must be heard for this year's budget preparation. So once again, let me thank the organizers, and it's back to you, Ahad.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Dr. Bukhar
I'm Dr. Karkra, and I want to thank SDPI of Sukkur IBA University, and we appreciate this effort taken by the SDPI to organize this dialogue, public-private dialogue, to discuss pre-budget proposals. And in this, they are going to record the sentiments of the businessmen, and then they process this information, and that will be used for the budget making. And the real objective of this dialogue is to bring together the society, the businessmen, the academic institutions, and the policymakers, so that they can make their narrative and also offer this how and make this available information to the government, that how government can incentivize all these businesses and also to the society, so that a conducive environment could be created for a good business. And then importantly, in this case, the sustainability is an issue. And right now, we all know that we are all engulfed by the risks, and those risks are at the micro level, at the meso level, as well as at the macro level. And in this scenario, all these risks could pass from, you can say, from financial to this COVID, and this COVID have almost changed what the usual business was. So in this changing scenario, we have to think out of the box. It is not only just to say out of the box, it is how we can strategize so that the ease of doing business should be there, not in the words, practically it must be there. So in this case, this business regulations becomes very important. So how we can offer a low cost businesses, how we can reduce the cost of doing business, and as well as how the society becomes more inclusive and we can take care of all the risks which are attached to us. And in this whole dialogue, we can bring together the government, the society, as well as the businessmen, and by which we can be on the way of sustainable growth. And of course, the mission of the Sukkur IBA is to serve the community, and we all together are here to serve the community and to bring the voice of the community to the masses as well as to the governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas. I'll just start off by briefly introducing the speakers for today. Of course, the people joining in as participants can also be part of the discussion through the chat window as well as the Q&A box. We are joined here, we will be very soon joined by Mr. Ikhlaq Ahmed from the Investment Department, along with Mr. Mustaq Kazmi and Abdul Majid Yusufani from Sindh Revenue Board are already here, and we will be looking forward to hearing both of them, very senior colleagues from the Sindh Revenue Board. We have from the private sector, we have M. Abdul Jabbar Saab, who is a very senior business leader as well as the board member for Sustainable Development Policy Institute. We are also joined by Shaista Aisha, who is the CEO of Seed Ventures, Mr. Sajid Aslam, who is the president of ACCA, and Ms. Mahin Salman, who is a management consultant and is also has also represented CATI in the past. I don't know at the moment whether she is part of CATI or not. We will soon be joined by a representative from the Sukkur Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, the person who was supposed to be here, his father wasn't well, so he has nominated someone else. We will be joined by Shahid Hamid Saab from Faisal Bank and Rana Saifullah Sahib from the Metro Cash and Carry. I would start off by welcoming and thanking all of you for your prestigious time. So just to give you an idea about the pattern of the meeting, we'll just start off by a brief presentation by myself. After that, we will have 2 rounds of discussion, if all of you allow. The first round of discussion will have, I will try to give around 7 minutes to each of the panelists. I would request all of you to focus more on the solution part rather than the problems part, just to be concise, and we have to give time to everyone here. And of course, our methodology gives the opportunity to the private sector first, and then we'll move on to the government to respond. So I'll start off with the presentation. It is just a brief presentation on overall economic outlook of Sindh, and of course we can keep the discussion focused around budgetary and non-budgetary proposals, just to ensure that there is a better business regulatory environment in Sindh province and in Pakistan. So just to start off, this slide actually represents almost 4 to 5 years of my life. I spent in Sindh. I was part of the team that installed around 4 of the projects of wind power, which are in Jhimpir and Kharo region of district Thatta. And this basically shows that there is a lot of potential in Sindh province with regards to energy industry, and there is a lot of maturity already in the business community here, which can be leveraged as we go along. Next slide, please. So just to give you a broad macroeconomic framework of the Pakistan macroeconomy, of course, these are some of the projections that we have from State Bank of Pakistan and the IMF. Of course, we have the 3rd wave of COVID here, and we are expected to have a depressed growth in the next few months as well. The investment to GDP ratio is not only weak, but has a negative trend. And this is probably a very important aspect that we need to discuss again and again. We need to improve this investment to GDP ratio. Of course, because the economic expansion was very weak due to COVID, and even before COVID, because the economy was trying to get stabilized. So the tax efforts again need to be expanded. And of course, when we're talking about the IMF program, then we need to make a lot of decisions that might not be politically very popular, but we will still have to go around. And of course, the assumptions regarding growth in revenue and primary fiscal balance were not clear. Next slide. So regarding the budgetary position, there was additional debt created. Bank borrowing will be required again, and this will again create a deficit. Economic justification for rise in public administration spending is missing, although all the governments, the provincial and the federal government, are talking about austerity measures, but the budget unfortunately is not showing the numbers that shows that the austerity measures are giving good outcomes. So I think the focus needs to shift to outcomes and impacts now, and a detailed analysis of the costs being incurred by the government need to be evaluated, and afterwards we can shift towards the austerity and other components. Next is, of course, the net revenue receipts. They are contingent upon higher tax and non-tax revenue efforts. As I previously said, that most of the efforts in the provincial and federal governments have not achieved the targets that were envisaged in the previous budgets. And of course, COVID can be a reason, but the budget efficiency was not very, the budget spending as well as the target achieving of revenue was not very much achieved in the previous budgets as well. And of course, then the privatization, the assumptions regarding the privatization proceeds are also very unclear, and some friendly countries, of course, are being approached to carry that burden. Next slide. So looking at the Sindh budget, if we analyze the budget from the last year, we can clearly see there is basically we haven't been able to achieve the targets both for the tax revenue and the non-tax revenues. Next slide. And again, from the expenditure side, I know this slide is not clear, but you can clearly see that the government has not been able to spend the budgeted amounts, and that is the same for the previous years as well. So we need to maybe, and I think Sindh government is leading on that. We might be able to do it better if we go for the public-private partnership model. Next slide. And similarly, you can see the same for the development expenditure. Next slide. So just moving forward, if we talk about the budgetary priorities of the Sindh government in 2020-21, these are the four major budgetary priorities: investment, agriculture, industries, and social welfare. Next slide. If we talk about investment, there is a good support here, and of course, Shaista being part of Seed Ventures, which deals with a lot of young startups and tech ventures, she'll be able to appreciate and comment on this more. That several million Pak rupees have been basically being kept for supporting the IT tech startup ecosystem in Sindh. Next slide. Talking about agriculture, because COVID has affected agriculture here as well. So there are three types of subsidies being kept. Around 1,000 million rupees have been kept for all these. We talk about industries. The Sindh government has focused on SMEs, and around 5,000 million have been kept as soft loan program for the SMEs through Sindh Bank. And these loans are very much required, and these will be eventually be translated into good industrial and economic development in the province. Next. Regarding social welfare, we have some of the things that are related to the doing business. For instance, small businesses have been given some loans. There have been small farmers and community-based loans have also been initiated in this budget. And then, of course, there is Sindh People Support Program, that is cash transfer around 20 billion rupees. Next. Some of the new projects that have been started include the Dhabaji Special Economic Zone. I really like to focus on this. Dhabaji Special Economic Zone is 1530 acres of land, and very much, I think it is placed in a very, very good position for exports and imports. Procurement is under process, but the process is still slower than the Faisalabad Special Economic Zone. So maybe it's good that some of the things can be learned, some of the lessons can be learned from other special economic zones in order to make it more useful. Next. And these are some of the envisaged benefits from the special economic zones. Next slide. So with regards to the public-private partnership models, I had an opportunity to recently visit Thar, and this is one of the, it's basically the main mine of the Thar coal project, Block 2. And this is, I think, one of the best public-private partnership models that have been developed and used in Pakistan. And this has resulted in socio-economic development of the region as well. So what I thought Thar to be was totally opposite to my what actually we found when we visited Thar later in the 2020. Next slide. So we have coal mining and power plants in Thar. Then water treatment plant at TP1 is also a public-private partnership model. Supply of industrial water from Nabisar to Vijahir. This is also one of the projects that have been developed in public-private partnership mode. Next. So while the Thar coal project majorly is under CPEC, there have been other coal-fired projects that have been basically that have come across as part of CPEC. Some of the projects have been mentioned. Next. And these are the total of 7 projects that are, 4 of which are basically wind power. And some of these haven't started yet. The last 2, Pacho and Western Energy, are yet to be, basically they haven't reached their financial close yet. But Matiari to Lahore transmission line is under construction. Next. And KT Mandar Seaport Development Project is also underway. That is also that is basically being developed at the moment. This is not under construction. But this is, I think, something that is really required with regards to the sentiments. Next slide. So just keeping in mind that how can the problems that the private sector is facing in Sindh province in general and in Pakistan overall, how can we solve them through this particular budget that is coming up? So I'll again request all of you to focus on the problems and not the solutions. At the moment, the Sindh government has several initiatives for ease of doing business, but still, based on our perception survey being conducted almost 1.5 years back, the business community still has a lot of issues. While we are acquainted with the issues, I would request you all to focus on the solutions for this. And this is where I close. Now let's start the discussion. I'll first of all request Mr. M.A. I'll request Muhammad Abdul Jabbar Saab to give his initial remarks. Sir, I would request you to keep your remarks within 7 minutes. Thank you.
But thank you very much for inviting me through FPCCI. I would like to have the point of view of FPCCI on all these issues. So rightly you said that we should focus on the solutions instead of over agitating the problems. But anyway, the solutions always are preceded by projection of the problems. But let me be sort of very close to the requirements of this workshop. Number one, I think let me talk about the budgetary requirements. Sindh government has been asking that on the basis of 18th Amendment and on the basis of other issues, are demanding that sales tax on goods should be collected by the province. Though other provinces have not joined, but if we look at the Indian model, I think the states are also doing the same job. And then moreover, one thing is there that during the present situation and budgetary discussions, the federal government is often coming up with the alleged idea that after NFC award distribution of 57.5%, nothing is left with the federal government to respond to the external and internal date payments, and even it is left with constraints to even sponsor the expenditures of armed forces. So I think if that logic prevails upon, then probably that is the time to rethink about the whole taxation model, because I personally believe that in our country, first of all, we have to settle with a model, which model can be hassle-free, harassment-free, and which model can also induce the people to come into the taxation net. So for that, I will only talk about some of the tax policy principles which FPCCI has been pleading and written to Prime Minister. They have formed a committee and they are looking into it. Those are very simple. Taxes should be low rate, broad-based, predictable, and wherever possible should be flat. We are also talking about every individual or firm or corporate must file income tax returns, you see. We also believe that all sources of income should be taxed equally without discrimination. Here I'll just give an explanation. Often the people of Pakistan are alleged by the academia and some of the think tank forces that there is a very low tax to GDP ratio, but one equally forgets that there is almost no tax collection from the agriculture. On the arithmetic number, if you will add the agriculture and make it proportionately or even half reciprocity responsibility of the taxation to GDP ratio goes up to 17 and 18%. I mean, so we must keep in mind. So I have been always requesting the think tanks and other medias that presently the wild allegation of the people of Pakistan that they are tax evasive is not correct, because 100 million people are on the broadband, 12.5% tax is being realized from them. So it is really sad to see that the people of Pakistan are being pasted as cheats, evasive, you see, before the donors and before the others who have also picked up this idea. At least we from in-house should not take up these issues like such which are not existing. And the point is that we believe that presumptive and withholding taxation must be discontinued. and only taxable income should be taxed. We also believe that import taxes should be minimized to encourage investment and control inflation. In this country, very strange it is that before you sell anything, before you manufacture anything, you have to pay taxes up to the 50 and more % of the chain of lending cost of the goods. We personally believe, I personally believe, and also the FPCI believes, and they have taken up this issue, that at import stage, there should be single rate, broad-based in each chapter, maximized to the 5%. However, the domestic manufacturing can be protected for a reasonable tariff on import through PCTs and through expanding the HS code from the present 8 to 12. And then we also believe that consumption and transaction taxes should be minimized to encourage business activity, because we are ourselves generating inflation. Government is not only partly but fully responsible for generating inflation. It could not rightly determine the right actions for dollar-rupee parity and the stabilization thereof. And it also, at the imposed stage last year, fueled the inflation by increasing and introducing para-tariffs, additional custom duties, regulatory duties, and even today, most of the people are just making application that they import raw materials, but they are subjected to 5.5% withholding tax at import stage. We have been chasing FBR right from the beginning, but FBR is not actually economic development agency. FBR is not worried about the growth of this country. FBR thinks that taxes drive the economy, which is not correct. So in all our presentations and persuasions with FBR, we just come to know that they have only one question: how to compensate this drop from others. So in overall, the economic scenario and its development does not appear to be baby of the FBR. And rightly, I think government 2 years back isolated the tax policy unit, but it has yet to work. We in FPCI believe that if the independence of tax policy unit can be ensured by putting the experts, by putting the economists, and by putting others who are looking after the economic and growth development paradigm, probably that could be a solution, because presently FBR is not only tax collecting agency, it has become a tax policy unit. It has become an economic paradigm, whether adverse or whether positive or whether whatever results affecting agency, which is not correct. They are adjudicators and they are executive machinery, which is again infringes upon the constitutional requirement that FBR cannot pick up the job of adjudication, because adjudication functions have to be separate and independent of FBR. Then we are also believe that income tax collection should become main tool of tax revenue, and we must move away from regressive taxation to a progressive taxation, in the sense that we should not, means the government tool should not inflate and should not create inflation. You see, we should encourage and not discourage corporatization through taxation. You see, so we have been sort of suggesting that.
सर 1 मिनट में काइंडली अगर रैप अप कर लें, थैंक यू। आपको दूसरे राउंड में दोबारा मौका मिल जाएगा।
ठीक है, okay. So I think I can stop here. We can talk later on. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, sir. We can probably go to Ms. Maheen Salman now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, ma'am. Thank you for joining.
You hear?
We are able to hear you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. My comments regarding this is it appears to be very nice that we have kept a lot of amount for SMEs and startups and all that. But what I see here is there is no direction for SMEs. You have not identified the sectors where to develop these SMEs, where to subsidize your efforts, and where to develop the people. Like आपने chemical sector को develop करना है, because most of your raw material almost in every sector is imported. So if your goal should be to curb imports, right, and to develop the economy locally, because this will also generate local employment. So it's going to be beneficial in a lot of ways if we develop our own local industry, but that direction is missing from what I see. आपने सिर्फ IT को highlight किया है, but other than IT, there are lots of other sectors which can be highlighted for SMEs. where you can give subsidies, where you can develop people, you can develop your own resources and your own industries. So this is something which I believe should be there. The second thing should be a curb on corruption and accountability. You should go more towards digitization, finish off personal contact wherever possible, so that the corruption comes to an end and we in real terms are able to score on ease of doing business index. Because this, as industries, we feel that we are lacking a lot on ease of doing business. So these are a few comments that I would like to make in this round.
Thank you, ma'am. So we can probably go to Mr. Asad Ali Shah. Mr. Asad Ali Shah is, of course, a former finance minister in the Sindh province, and he has been managing partner of Deloitte in Pakistan. He's currently owning his own association. I think it's a chartered accountant company, Asad Ali Shah Associates. So, sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I just joined and just listened to a few remarks. May I know the context? I'm sorry, I missed the introductory part. What is the focus? Are you seeking my comments with regard to what?
Sir, we are just trying to get proposals, solution-based proposals for the government with regards to the budget, upcoming budget. And generally, if you have any suggestions that can improve the ease of doing business in Pakistan and particularly in the Sindh province.
So it's both focused on federal and Sindh government?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir.
Okay, I think I heard Mr. Jabbar Memon and Ms. Maheen Salman. I think those were largely valid comments. See, my recommendation to both the federal and provincial governments is that I think they need to relook at the entire government structure because Pakistan is continuously going down and down, and the policies that we have followed and not very consistently, unfortunately, have not worked. There is, as far as fiscal policies are concerned, I agree with Mr. Jabbar Memon that we have to do away with withholding taxes, with presumptive taxes, very high tax rates. But then we'll need to, reinvent the FBR. We need to ensure enforcement. I think existing taxation framework, in my judgment, needs to be totally reinvented. I think the existing mindset of the bureaucracy needs to be relooked at because we are not moving forward. We are actually moving backward, whether it is our GDP, whether it is our social sectors, whether it is our HDI, whether it is our gender, whether it is entrepreneurship, so you name it. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm being negative, perhaps. Many of you may feel that I'm negative, but that is what it is. And I don't see, I think, any credible kind of dialogue even happening to discuss the real issues of Pakistan's economy. You see, most of the dialogue has been based on corruption only and accountability. And unfortunately, the accountability framework that we have established is highly flawed. It doesn't catch the big thief. We do not have real accountability on corruption. But the real accountability that we should have is the accountability for outcomes. So the governments are not performing, our policy is not working. Our businesses are not performing. Our businesses, unfortunately, are thriving on rent seeking. So we need to relook at the entire ecosystem, of the way we have managed this country over the last several decades. So these are my, I think at the very outset, issues. We need to relook at it. Otherwise, this budget will just be another exercise, will not be able to address the fiscal deficit, will not be able to address the inflation. Unfortunately, things are not working. And in all that, the most important thing is the teams. We need to understand what we have to do, how we have to do, but most important thing is who. Who is more important than how? So I think we need to have right teams. We need to have outcome-based governance, whether it is at federal or at provincial level. And one of the things that we have to focus on in the budget making is we have mostly focused on fiscal side. I mean, on raising revenues, and that also through very outdated and archaic systems, rather than developing digital and technology solutions, using technologies, because we don't use technology because it will make us transparent. So I think that is the last thing that the governments want. So if we have, so that's on the, so the more critical aspect is really, I think Pakistan has bankrupted itself more because of our expenditure side. We spend too much. We are bankrupt not because we tax too much, it's because we waste too much. So most of the projects that we start, we overspend. Our non-development expenditure is huge. And I think a very simple comparison I'll give you is that with the Bangladesh. I mean, Bangladesh, was part of Pakistan 50 years ago. And we know that now they are reaching $2,000 per capita income, whereas we have gone back from $1,500 to, I don't know, $1,300 or $1,200. They are much better in social indicators. They are, one of the star economies. They've had highest growth rate in the South Asia, and only behind perhaps Vietnam in Asia. So what are the differences between Bangladesh and Pakistan? That will give us some, way forward. So first of all, let us compare. One area that we talk too much is corruption. Now, if you look at corruption index, Bangladesh is worse than Pakistan. They have remained around 145, 147 on Transparency International Index, whereas Pakistan has remained around 117. Now it is around, I don't know, 116 or 117. So we are bad, but we are much better than Bangladesh. So I'm not saying we should not eradicate corruption. We need to. This definitely is one factor that holds nations and economies, backward. But this is not the key reason why Pakistan has been held back. Now, other factor that I would like to compare with Bangladesh is now on the taxation side. Again, tax to GDP ratio. Pakistan, I think we had reached around 12%, but unfortunately, the last few years we have slightly lagged behind. So we may be around 10, 11%, but we are still slightly ahead of Bangladesh. Bangladesh's 10% of their tax to GDP ratio is 10% of their GDP, I think. So we are slightly better than Bangladesh, even this area. So the most critical aspect where actually Pakistan lags in terms of economic, management is our expenditure to GDP ratio is nearly 21, 22% compared to Bangladesh, probably 13 to 14% or even less. So that's why, their budget balances, and that is the reason that we continue to borrow, and unfortunately we continue to borrow for unproductive expenditure and uneconomic projects. So our economic decision making is seriously flawed. So that's on the economic side. But even more important is the human development. Ultimately, the nation's progress based on, the quality of their human capital. We continue to talk that we have the youth pulse, we have huge, youth population, but, unfortunately, in terms of education and skills, our youth and our overall population is most backward in the entire subcontinent. And that is why we are not doing any thinking to change our, our system and the way we function, because for many, many years, we still have nearly 40% of our population totally illiterate, almost 75 to 80% quasi-literate. So in the digital age, in 21st century, when people are talking about most of the developed nations are 100% literacy, and they are talking about digital skills. Unfortunately, we have a huge population that cannot read or write. So nations do not develop based on natural resources. You look at Japan, you look at US, it's the skills of the people. So the most important asset that the country has is our human resources. So my most important suggestion would be that Pakistan needs to, and federal and provincial governments needs to look at our skill development and education sector, and of course our health sector, to improve our human resource. Because if we can improve our human resource, if we can improve our human capital, if we can embed critical thinking in our people, and if we can create an open and objective society which objectively assesses our issues and develop an idea-based kind of society, then we can move forward. But if we continue the way we have been, unfortunately, we will not move forward, and we'll continue to lag behind compared to the world.
Sum up in 1 minute, and we will get back to you.
I'm sorry if these remarks I had not prepared. I didn't know I was going to speak on this. But these are broadly my thoughts at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just taking the capacity building of youth forward, we have with us Shaista Aisha. I hope you're able to hear us now, Shaista.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Ahad. Sorry, I got disconnected earlier. The internet is just acting up today.
I like your interventions to focus more on the startup ecosystem, especially in the Sindh province. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you, Ahad, and thank you, Dr. Vakar, for inviting me here today to speak on this. I will, on one end where I cover youth enterprises, I will also be talking about women, primarily because I am a woman leader myself, but also because I think that we need more and more interventions that support women, micro, nano, and small enterprises in Sindh. You know, we've been running a number of interventions, and I'd like to kind of agree here with Maheen, you know, when she said that there is this strong focus just on IT related segments. You know, there are other industries and segments within Pakistan that need to be concentrated on. Also within Sindh, I think, you know, in terms of reviving the creative economy within Sindh, in terms of looking at the local produce that is being, produced at an agricultural level. Also in terms of developing the capacity of the youth in Sindh with respect to agriculture, with respect to the creative economy, that is also super, super important, you know, instead of just concentrating on one. It's important to understand that, our solutions can be IT enabled, but there are other sectors that we need to concentrate on in order to develop, more and more jobs across the sectors. The number of graduates that come out of our universities are not completely absorbed by in the industries here in Pakistan. And, you know, if you look at Sindh, I mean, where are the graduates going? Where are they finding their jobs? So if we want to, in comparison to other provinces, I think as from a provincial point of view, I think we should all be working towards creating ease of businesses for youth that are present within within the Sindh province. We've conducted a number of different interventions that are, based on, like a recent intervention that we're conducting with Philip Morris is on providing business process innovation or social innovation through technology-enabled solutions. And 99% of the interventions or the applications that we received have been from Punjab, not Sindh. And that kind of raises the questions as of what is really going on, you know. And I was just looking at the numbers in terms of how focused they are on sort of supporting IT. And I think the Sindh Board of Revenue and we can definitely work together in developing more IT-enabled initiatives. So I think that more work needs to be done with respect to, supporting IT interventions, IT enterprises, and IT solutions within Sindh, and developing something that is with reference to context and not just what everybody else is doing. So I think every province has its own youth voice, and we need to start listening to what the youth within Sindh is saying. And that means urban, rural, peri-urban. We need to take all those voices into account. Also, what is true for Karachi is not true for Sukkur. What is true for Sukkur is not true for Hyderabad. And I think we need to kind of come down to that realization of what works where. So that's one end of what I wanted to talk about. The second is, of course, women, nano, micro, and small enterprises. And it's interesting to see how everything is concentrated on gender diversity, and we're talking about more voice for women and all of that, but you don't see any specific interventions that are focused towards women. And, most of the time women don't even know about them. For instance, the COVID relief package, I mean, how many women entrepreneurs actually knew about this? Similarly, you have like a great scheme for refinance and credit for women. And again, women micro entrepreneurs or new startups don't even know about these interventions. So there's a gap, I mean, you can't create solutions and not inform your target population about those solutions. Then we need to start looking into what women entrepreneurs or women enterprises within Sindh are doing. Sindh needs to have its own ecosystem, its own enterprise support ecosystem, where relevant stakeholders within Sindh are supporting this system. We should not try and sort of, like I said, what works for one province may not work for the other province. So what is happening in Sindh with respect to women enterprises, whether they're youth or, in a larger age group, I think we need to sort of see to those specific areas. And again, in most of our programs, we focus on asking women enterprises or youth-based enterprises to formally register their businesses. And the kind of resistance we get at times from that from them is because nobody is really bothered to actually communicate the importance of having yourself formally registered into the economy. Nobody's actually, they don't understand the language on the FBR website. It's too complex for them. So I think really simplifying it to a point where a business understands what's in it for me to actually be part of the formal economy. Why am I not better off operating under the table? Why do I need to pay my taxes? What is the advantage of paying my taxes, and what advantages do I get if I pay my taxes? And that kind of communication has not happened at the mass level. Well, at least not in the populations that we've worked for. So we've been trying to do that communication. And I think a lot of the focus of the budget should just not, one of the solutions, capacity development is super important. And on the other hand, awareness and, creating education around these segments is also very important. And then we need to look at industries that are—
Kindly wind up in 1 minute, please.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, this is essentially what I had to say. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move to Mr. Sajid Aslam from ACCA.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we had some discussions already, and I'll just add a couple of things there. Number one, first we have to evaluate where we stand in terms of the GDP contribution from Sindh. So it's somewhere like 75 to 80 billion where we are right now. Is it the right contribution? Historically, it used to be 32%. Now it's down to 27. So that's been something is need to be fixed in terms of the economic model or economic plan for Sindh. Number two, Sindh need to be divided when we are proposing what is required within Karachi and what is required in the rest of the Sindh. So definitely the large industries, we look at the service sector, we look at the head offices, we look at for the financial institution, the stock market. I think all those are predominantly the Karachi based, and where the overall Sindh, if we look at, there are other resources which we need to focus. What I'll suggest or propose in terms of the focus area, definitely agriculture, and the value chain of the agriculture is one of the most important area, whether we start from a capacity building, yield improvement, even bringing the techniques right. I think there's over the period, what we lost in the agriculture is not that only the techniques, it's the overall, the size of the land, which is now not very economical, as well as the capacity building required to revive the old techniques and then lead towards the mechanized and the latest technology side. That's a form of proper core agriculture. Sindh has already put a lot of money aside in the previous budgets as well, and I'm hoping in the current budget on the research and the seed side of it, we have to start seeing that spending, and we have to start evaluating the impact of that spending going forward. It's not only about the funding, it's about how efficient, what is the productivity gain we can look around the agriculture, and not only from the crops or the yield, it's the value chain around it. So that's an important area for economics of Sindh, where the agriculture need a one core focus. Second, if you look at the Sindh, the micro enterprises, it's not even the SME. If you go in a rural Sindh, the micro enterprises who have got different skills, but they do not have access to markets. They're, whether we talk about the poultry side of it, we talk about the clothing, and they have got a very specific fabrics, and they have got a very specific designs, which have got a global market. So micro enterprises and their access to market for the rural Sindh is another important area. And that's again linked with a certain capacity building. It's linked with a certain awareness. It's linked with a certain connection and the community development, which can take that entire community and the social and economic development of that community. So micro enterprises is a second area other than the agriculture value chain. The third area, I think, which require a great focus is the export of services. In Sindh, there is a certain anomaly around the export of services, where some of the exports are tech, some of the exports are not. we are talking about the services taxes perspective. I think one area which need immediate attention, that any export of service, whether it's coming from a freelancing side, whether it's coming through the organized sector, any export of service should be tax-free, regardless who is making that that export. So it should be very open-ended. Any export of service, that should be totally tax-free. Then we talked about the SME, and we talked about the startups. But historically, and that's ACCA is raising it again and again, and we would like to raise it again, unless until government procurement start adding up 10 to 15% procurement from the local SME and the local businesses or startups, we will not see those startups expanding. Right now, the criteria of the government procurement, and if you look at it's 1.1 trillion of budget for government of Sindh, but once it's come to the procurement side, and we are only procuring from a very established organization, we are not creating enough room for startup and SME to participate in that. And where the government is not sharing that risk, government is trying to procure in a very risk-free environment. Everywhere in the world where we have seen the startups and the SME sector growing very quickly, I think the government procurement should include and relax certain rules for startups and the SME side. Other area, I would say the natural resources, definitely those are one of a key area for Sindh, and attracting investments mean that there has to be enough incentive and the protection for the people who are making those investments in a long-term basis. In a very recent past, the conversation around offering exemption and withdrawing exemption has created a trust deficit for people who are willing to invest in those natural resources in mining, whether we talk about the coal, whether we talk about the energy sector, whether we talk about the other mineral side of it. So I think that trust deficit need to be addressed by consistent policy, like Asad Ali Shah also mentioned, the consistent policies, and then creating that trust with the investor. And the last point, I think I'll pick up for the Sindh Revenue Board right now, and that's also Abdul Jabbar Memon Sahab has also highlighted, the revenue collection authorities somehow are significantly focused on the collection alone. I would suggest, and we suggested that 2-3 years back as well, the commissioners who are responsible for collection should always have, should also have a KPI that how the business working in their jurisdiction, whether there are new businesses coming up, whether the total top line or the revenue is growing, whether the capital formation is happening, all that data is always available with the revenue collection agencies. But we do evaluate the performance based on how much revenue is collected, but we never link it with or correlate it whether the new capital is formed, whether there's new businesses which are being set up, whether the top line and the bottom line is growing or not. So I think if we start bringing this visibility, or at least a KPI internally for the revenue collection agencies, their policy will become more directed towards where they can facilitate businesses rather than only looking at how much amount they can collect without looking at the other side, whether it's hampering business or that's helping the creating an environment where the business can grow. So I think change of the KPI will also help in terms of ease of doing business and bringing a more business-friendly policies.
In a minute, please.
So I think that's all from my side at the moment, and we will see how we take it in the next round. So thank you.
Thank you, Sujit sir. We'll move on to the government. Sindh Revenue Board, we have Mr. Mustaq Kazmi Sahab and one of the members of SRB with us. Sir, over to you. If you'd like to respond as well as suggest some good pre-budget proposals and overall proposals for better business regulation in Sindh. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Abdul Pani, member IT and audit from Sindh Revenue Board. to make this.
Thank you.
Discussion.
Continue, please.
And
You're audible.
I see that some of the suggestions coming in from various speakers. One of them very important that I noted down, which relates to my responsibility, was a suggestion from Shaista Aisha. She is talking about improving the ease of business through the use of technology-enabled solutions. Let me let you know that SRB takes these suggestions very seriously. SRB has been a forerunner in employing technology for improving the ease of business. One such example is we are the first revenue agency in Pakistan which had introduced the alternate delivery channels in 2015, earlier than FBR, earlier than PRA, earlier than all revenue agencies within the country. So any taxpayer who wants to make a tax payment can stay in his office and does not need to come and visit the bank or visit our organization. Rather, the person can file the tax return and make the payment out of his account directly to SRB without going to the bank. Just one example. Another example is on the litigation side, which has recently been introduced by FBR. We are already a few years back that if there is any litigation happening with SRB, you don't need to come and visit and see us in our office. All you could do is join us by either Zoom or you could join us by Skype and you could attend the hearing if it relates to any tax litigation. This is what we call the electronic hearing system. Another area that we focused is point of sale terminal. We have integrated one of our servers with the point of sale system of some of the taxpayers at the retail stage. Another interesting area is since our beginning, that is 10 years by now, you could always register online, make an application. As soon as we get the application, all requirements are fulfilled. We register the person within a few minutes. You don't need to wait for a day even. And if it comes to filing of tax returns, making payments, everything is electronic here. We have a top of the line data center, which provides us services. The data center is located within the SRB premises. Apart from that, we have developed an enterprise resource planning solution for our core business areas, which of course are like audit, adjudication, appeals, litigation, tax recovery, tax facilitation, like there's a CRM system as well. Apart from that, for taking care of the other areas which are non-core, we have procured an ERP, Oracle ERP. So we very much focused on technology solutions, and we would love to cooperate with any organization that can provide us some help. If you have any ideas, please do share with us. With this discussion, I would forward it to Mushtaq Kazmi Saab. He would like to contribute something.
Thank you, Majid Saab. This is Mushtaq Kazmi, Advisor Tax Policy in Sindh Revenue Board. As most of you must be aware, that when this sales tax on services was devolved to the provinces, effectively, I should say, through the 7th NFC award. In fact, it was devolved in much earlier, but the collection system was devolved only in 2010. And at that time, Sindh was the only province which legislated its law. And despite many doubts, hiccups, and handicaps, we were able to collect about rupees 25 billion in the very first year on the same tax base and at the same tax rate as Federal Board of Revenue used to collect for us. And that was hardly 3 to 4 billion in the first up to 2009. And only in 2010, it went up to 11 billion or 13 billion. But what we did, that we were conscious that the high rate of sales tax on the services or any indirect tax high rate. We didn't favor that, and then we started gradually reducing the tax rate. So we reduced the tax rate from 16% to 15%. Again, then the very next year, we reduced it from 15% to 14%. And then we reduced it to 13% in the next year. And we thought that probably others will follow suit. And in that manner, we shall be able to be having the reduced rate further. We could go up to 10%. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. None of the tax administrations, whether Federal Board of Revenue or the Punjab Revenue Authority or the other two provinces, they never reduced their rates. So we, at the moment, have the lowest of the standard rate of sales tax, that is the 13%. And we want to reduce it further. But now, as you may be aware, that a National Tax Council has been created in the Federation, which is represented by the Federal Finance Minister and the 4 provincial finance ministers. And the task assigned to it is harmonization of sales tax, number 1. Number 2, harmonization of the tax rates also. So we are focused on that, and we hope that while harmonizing the sales tax and they're harmonizing the sales tax rates, the NTC will come up with a solution which provides relief, because we are confident that when we reduce the tax rates, we collected higher amount of revenue. So because there is lesser of evasion, more of compliance, and more of trust building. We would like to reduce it further, provided now the National Tax Council and other provinces, they follow the suit. As regards ease of doing business, we are very conscious that at the moment, most of the business enterprises, they have to file 5 tax returns every month. They have to get registered with 5 tax authorities, and they have to visit 5 tax portals. Tomorrow, Sindh Revenue Board and others are signing a memorandum of understanding with the Federal Board of Revenue to have single portal and single return. So this will provide the much desired ease of doing business for everyone. And we fully support this. We have always supported this, that to be developed. It was assigned to PRAL. PRAL did some work. Now the FBR has taken over this task, and we will be supporting them. As regards the other issue, that FBR, which was talked about by Jabbar Sahab and others, we have proposed to the FBR that, number 1, that the high rate of sales tax in FBR, that is one thing which causes, number 1, problems for the taxpayers. That should be reduced. We have also said that kindly reduce the withholding tax rates, because the withholding tax rates at the import stage, as some of you said, the highest, or even at the domestic stage, that causes, number 1, blockage of the capital. Even on the machinery, why is withholding sales tax should be levied at the import stage when that machinery will come to the importer, and it will take time to get it installed and get it into operation. And we have also asked them that this withholding rate, there should be a capping, that never, we have proposed that do not make it more than 5%. 5% should be the maximum, and you can go from 0.25% or 0.15% to 5%. But otherwise, reduce it. Now it is up to 20% in some cases. That's very high. And Sindh Revenue Board every year invites the proposals from the trade industry, the chambers of commerce and the associations. And we work on that, we examine that. In certain cases, we also discuss it with those chambers, associations, and taxpayers. And then they put it up to the government, which makes the policy every year. that whether what to accept and what not to accept. We make our recommendations, and then it is for the political government to decide it as per their policy. As most of you are aware, that unlike the scope of customs duty or federal sales tax or income tax, the scope of the provincial sales tax is very restricted, highly restricted, because it is a positive tariff schedule that only these things are likely. That gives to legal dispute that whether it falls under that description or not. So what we are trying in consultation with the other three provinces, that instead of having a positive tariff schedule, we should have a negative tariff schedule, that we should say that every service is liable to sales tax, except for these, which will be in the negative list, and then there will be an exempt list. So that's coming, the work is going on, and that will facilitate everyone in understanding the scope of the sales tax. About ease of doing business, Majid has explained that everything here is on e-portal and through e-solutions, and we discourage people coming to SRB itself. We love that all their problems are solved online, and we have, other than that, we have this CRM system, that if one calls, it goes to the CRM system, and the CRM system responds to all the queries, gives the clarifications. And that's all what I have to say. We have been achieving the targets, unlike FBR, I must say. FBR has consistently been failing in achieving the targets, and that gives, as Asad Shah Sahab and others have spoken, that aggravates the problems of the provinces, because the estimates for the development expenditure and the non-development expenditure are based on those estimates which FBR said that, okay, this year we will collect this amount. And then we estimate what will be transferred to the Sindh province. But when FBR fails, then obviously we have to cut the expenditure. And the expenditure which can be cut will be the development expenditure. So that is the unfortunate part of failing to achieve the targets. At this moment, Sindh Revenue Board contributes about 52% of the total tax receipts of the Sindh province alone, as compared to the other three departments, which are the excise and taxation and the BOR and the electricity energy department, which collects the energy duty. It's performing well. We are open organization, and we are there for the providing all the ease of doing business. Even the United Nations organization, which is monitoring the EODB, they have appreciated the stance and the responses of this Revenue Board and have issued a certificate of appreciation to us, which I wonder if other institutions of the federal tax authorities and the provincial tax authorities were awarded or not. Well, thank you very much. I stop there.
Thank you, sir. It's really good to see that the government appreciates that the doing business in Sindh and in Pakistan is difficult, and they're trying to actually ease it. So now we can start off with the second round. I would request each of you to complete their interventions within 3 minutes. So I'll start off with Abdul Jabbar Sahab. You can complete your interventions, which I interrupted. Thank you, sir.
अच्छा, मेरा ख्याल है कि ये बातें जो मैंने सुनी, तो चीजें तो बहुत सारी मेरे जहन में, मगर जो जिस खास चीज की तरफ मैं एक आना चाहूंगा, सिफारिश भी करूंगा, ये भी कहना जरूरी होगा कि एसआरबी की डेवलपमेंट में मेरा भी बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा था. आई वाज मेंबर ऑफ द टास्क फोर्स, एंड आई फेयरली रिमेंबर कि एसआरबी के न बनने के रुकावट सबसे ज्यादा एफबीआर ने क्रिएट की थी, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस ने क्रिएट की थी. आई यूज्ड टू शटल So that shows the mindset. Government's at the doorstep and government's collecting the taxes in the environment which it understands better are the provincial environments and the provincial governments better than federal government. मगर काफी रेजिस्टेंस रही और मेरा ख्याल ये कहना भी मुनासिब होगा कि असद अली शाह यहाँ पे है. He was the one who encouraged me and he was the one who sort of facilitated me and recommended me to become member of the task force. अब बात आ रही है जो मैं रिकमेंडेशन करना चाह रहा हूँ यहाँ पे. दूसरी 2-3 बातें फिर कर लूंगा 3 मिनट में जल्दी. वो ये है कि काजमी साहब जैसे और माजिद जैसे अच्छे लोग वहाँ पे मौजूद हैं. और ये भी एक हकीकत है कि सिंध में सवाए एसआरबी के बाकी सारे डिपार्टमेंट्स जो हैं उनमें कंट्रोवर्सीज हैं, क्वेश्चंस हैं. तो दैट वुड सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रूव दैट कि एसआरबी इज वर्किंग फेयरली वेल. मेरी रिकमेंडेशन ये है कि सिंध में 18 अमेंडमेंट के बाद EOBI जो है had to be devolved to Sindh. EOBI बनी. I was member of the trustee, but then the Sindh government, due to its weak political will, could not steer it. उस वक्त मेरी ये रिकमेंडेशन थी, आज भी यही है कि EOBI जो है वो एडमिनिस्टर करे SRB. आज भी मेरी ये रिकमेंडेशन है कि सेसी और दूसरे जितने डिपार्टमेंट सिंध में लेबर लेवीज रिलेटेड, there are multiple windows. They all should come under a single window of SRB, and SRB should collect those taxes. And I am very much sure in the way they electronically they are operating, I think there will be encouragement and the taxes will always increase in a hassle-free, harassment-free and in a reduced tax rates environment. तो मेरी एक रिकमेंडेशन ये भी है, काजमी साहब भी बैठे हुए हैं, ये गवर्नमेंट के पास केस ले जाएं. EOBI का एक्ट बना, सिंध का सब कुछ है, किसी तरीके से उसको भी रिजॉल्व कराएं. इट्स अ बिग मनी. अब उसके बाद सेसी वैसी ये जितने लेबर लेवीज क्लब हैं इनको किसी तरीके से क्लब करके सिंगल लेवी में ले आए. फिर बाद में अपॉर्चुनेट कर सकते हैं ये लोग, सेसी को सेसी के दे दें, EOBI की में अगर कोई प्रोग्राम से वहां दे दें. एक तो मेरी रिकमेंडेशन ये है. अब मैं थोड़ा सा आगे बढ़ता हूँ. इन सारी चीजों को लोगों की मैंने सुना. यू सी, मेरा सबसे बड़ा जो है वो कंसर्न ये है कि पाकिस्तान में जो शाह साहब ने बातें की, ही इज राइट. वी आर आल्सो इन FPCI टॉकिंग अबाउट a complete overhauling of taxation structure and confine FBR to only tax collection agency. अब सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि उस सारी चीजों का मेन अम्ब्रेला क्या है इस मुल्क में. मेरी रिकमेंडेशन ये है कि मॉनिटरिंग एंड एवोल्यूशन ऑफ प्लानिंग कमीशन should be not only strict but should also be on the website and should justify its actions. मेरे अपने ख्याल में कि सबसे ज्यादा खराबियां मुझे प्लानिंग कमीशन में नजर आती हैं. अंदाजा लगाएं कि 40,000 मेगावाट प्लानिंग कमीशन ने क्लियर करके दिए थे और आज पाकिस्तान में पीक डिमांड होने जा रही है 24,800. ये सारा गैप जो है दिस इज कॉल्ड द सर्कुलर डेट कैपेसिटी पेमेंट्स. तो हाउ कम यानी हमारी चीजें प्लानिंग कमीशन से लेकर ही आगे खराब हो रही हैं. अब जहां तक FBR का ताल्लुक है तो इन FPCI, KCCI, ऑल द बिजनेस पीपल जहां मिलते हैं अपने बेटे बच्चों किसी और के बारे में गुफ्तगू करने के बजाय सिर्फ FBR की शोकाज नोटिस के ऊपर बात करते हैं. मेरा ख्याल है कि ये ट्रेंड जो शोकाज के FBR has become शोकाज मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फैक्ट्री. देखिए इंडस्ट्रियल ग्रोथ में अब मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि शोकाज मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फैक्ट्री जो है वो एक इंडस्ट्रियल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का पार्ट हुआ है. किसी तरीके से उसको रोकने की जरूरत है. आई वुड ऑल्सो से कि FBR ने अभी इस वक्त जो डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस है उसमें स्प्लिट किया है फंक्शंस में कि जी एक ऑडिट का है, एक रिकवरी का है. सो सेम शोकाज मैन्युफैक्चरिंग मशीनरी कंटिन्यूज. उसके बाद जो मैं खास बात करना चाहता हूँ, जो मेरी रिकमेंडेशन ये है कि शबर जैदी he had made a big mistake in impeding the growth of the economy. उन्होंने एक CNIC की कंडीशन इंट्रोड्यूस की जिससे आज पाकिस्तान में फेक एंड फ्लाइंग इनवॉइसेस के साथ साथ फेक CNICs का भी यूज हो रहा है. हाउ कम द टैक्स स्टैट्यूट्स जो है वो शुड बिकम बेस ऑफ रजिस्ट्रेशन. Statutes and law should not become base of registration. It is the job of the government, a job of the FBR. मुझे ये बताएं, मैं आखिरी बात ये कर रहा हूँ कि पाकिस्तान में 4 मिलियन कमर्शियल एंड इंडस्ट्रियल एंटरप्राइजेस एग्जिस्ट कर रही हैं आपके इलेक्ट्रिसिटी के कनेक्शन के ऊपर. टैक्स स्टैट्यूट्स के जरिए रजिस्ट्रेशन करना कि CNIC नॉन रजिस्टर को नहीं बेचना, दिस इज नॉट द वे. FBR के कंप्लीट स्टैट्यूट्स जो है दे शुड बी on the run of the river, I tell you, and they should be just flooded and sent back somewhere they need to be parked to see. इस तरीके से पाकिस्तान में जो है वो न हम पाकिस्तान चला पाएंगे, इकोनॉमिकली हम अनवायबल होते जा रहे हैं. हमारी जो सिचुएशन है, जो शाह साहब ने मेरा ख्याल बात की, वही है कि गवर्नेंस के साथ साथ हमें पूरा इस टैक्सेशन स्ट्रक्चर को तब्दील करना पड़ेगा, यानी एक फ्रेंडली करना. मैं एक आखिरी बात ये करता हूँ, आखिरी बात कर रहा हूँ मैं, 100 मिलियन पीटीए की वेबसाइट पे चाहे 100 मिलियन क्रॉस कर रही है, G3 G4. आपके पास और क्या रजिस्ट्रेशन चाहिए? बायोमेट्रिक लोगों ने कर लिया. नाउ यू हैव टू सेग्रीगेट कि इसमें से कौन से लोग हैं जो आपके थ्रेशोल्ड में आते हैं, कौन से नहीं आते हैं. दूसरा, काजमी साहब का मैं शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं कि उन्होंने हमारे इस लो टैक्सेशन के फलसफे को रिकमेंड किया. जो रोनाल्ड रीगन ने जब ये फलसफा लाया था, उस जमाने में जो है वो काफी अप्रीहेंशंस थी, बट द टैक्सेस डबल्ड. मेरे ख्याल में इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है. सो थैंक यू. आई विल स्टॉप हियर.
Thank you, Jazakallah sir. So I'll move to Asad Shah sir next.
Thank you. I think I will start from where Abdul Jabbar Memon Saab left, and I fully endorse this point of view that जो काजमी साहब ने भी mention किया था, सिंध का जो ये strategy है of having reduced rates, I would highly encourage Kazmi Saab and SRB to be bold and further reduce tax rates of SRB from 13% to they should consider going to 10%. देखें, सजीद असलम ने जैसे कहा कि सिंध का जो contribution था GDP में, that has declined over the years. Sindh has a natural advantage of, both the ports and entire trade concentration, being the financial capital Karachi and other cities in the vicinity, agriculture also, and then the coal. I think if the biggest objective of Sindh should be, I think, two objectives. One, to enhance its GDP. Two, it's invest in its human resources. ये दो चीजें एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट करेंगी. उसके लिए आई वुड हाईली रिकमेंड कि अगर आप टैक्स रेट्स को और रिड्यूस करेंगे तो आपकी टैक्स कलेक्शन बढ़ेगी, कम नहीं होगी. नंबर वन. नंबर टू, बिल्कुल जब्बार साहब ने सही कहा, नॉट ओनली EOBI बल्कि देखें FBR एक है पूरे सबसे ज्यादा टैक्स कलेक्शन जो है, जो भी है कम कलेक्शन करता है, लेकिन 4.5 ट्रिलियन या 5 ट्रिलियन का जो टारगेट है, लेकिन एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है. प्रोविंसेस में why is there is a need for 3 tax collecting organizations? I've been saying it for ages now. We have to cut the government to reduce the expenditure and make the government smart and productive. I would strongly recommend कि Excise and Taxation Department, Board of Revenue, जो भी tax collecting departments हैं, in addition to that, the EOBI and other significant taxes should all be combined in one, tax collection agency. Ideally, there should be one tax collection agency or some collaboration at the federal level also, but at least one tax collection in the provinces. So, I would suggest that cut the tax rate, reduce this. तीसरी चीज जो है, क्योंकि टाइम इतना ज्यादा नहीं है, देखिए असल प्रॉब्लम यही है कि हमारी सारी जो बजटिंग है, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट है, इट इज ऑल इनपुट बेस्ड. हम इनपुट्स लगाते रहते हैं और लोगों को टैक्स करते रहते हैं उसके लिए. इसलिए अब टैक्स जो है अनप्रोडक्टिव हो गया है, बिकॉज इशू इज कि हमारे पास एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप नहीं डेवलप हुई, आइडिया बेस्ड इकोनॉमी नहीं है. देखिए टैक्स जो है पूरा मुल्क कहाँ से आता है? टैक्स के पैसे से आता है, लेकिन टैक्स लोग तब देंगे जब एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप होगी, जब वो वैल्यू क्रिएट करेंगे. अनफॉर्चुनेटली वी आर नॉट क्रिएटिंग वैल्यू, वी आर नॉट creating ideas, we are not, our businesses are not productive. So the entire strategy of the government should be how to make an environment where entrepreneurship develops, where there is more risk taking नहीं है. Unfortunately, सारी हमारी policies जो हैं वो they are there to stop the risk. दूसरी बात ये है कि हमारे यहाँ failure एंड मेकिंग मिस्टेक्स जो है वो करप्शन हो जाती है। देखिए, विदाउट मेकिंग मिस्टेक्स एंड विदाउट फेलियर यू कैन नॉट इनोवेट। तो बात यह है कि फंडामेंटली वी हैव टू चेंज अवर कल्चर. We have to think, how do we convert Pakistan into an ecosystem where, you know, ideas flourish, where there is entrepreneurship, where there is risk taking, and where, you know, the policy making is to promote ease of doing business, reduce cost of doing business, to make Pakistan competitive compared to the rest of the world. So same goes for the provinces also. So provincial policy should be how to make Sindh more competitive. You know, it can only become more competitive if we invest in our human resources, if we improve the outcomes of our education, skill development, and develop entrepreneurship. And that can only happen if we reduce the tax rates, if we enhance. It is a good thing that SRB has done more facilitation, but I think we need to do much more than what has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to move to Dr. Waqar Akram next. He has some points on agriculture.
Thank you very much, Ahad. Actually, मैं सब लोगों की डिस्कशन सुन रहा था और ये इसमें पब्लिक प्राइवेट डायलॉग में और एग्रीकल्चर जो है वो सिंध गवर्नमेंट की जो प्रायोरिटीज़ हैं उसमें सेकंड नंबर पे है। और जो आहद ने प्रेजेंटेशन दी उसमें अबाउट 3000 बिलियन रुपीस जो हैं वो एलोकेट किए गए हैं एग्रीकल्चर के लिए। लेकिन इसमें जो इम्पोर्टेंट बात है एग्रीकल्चर में, जो सबसे बड़ा प्राइवेट सेक्टर पाकिस्तान में है वो एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर है। बिकॉज एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में तो प्राइवेट सेक्टर इसलिए कि फार्मर्स जो हैं वो प्राइवेटली ओन्ड फार्म्स हैं और इनपुट मार्केट और आउटपुट मार्केट, जो इनपुट मार्केट है वो भी टोटली जो पाकिस्तान में बेस करती है वो फार्मर्स के ऊपर बेस करती है। सिमिलरली जो आपका मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर है वो भी आपकी आउटपुट जो एग्रीकल्चर से आ रही है उसके ऊपर बेस करता है। और इन दिस कंडीशन अगर आप इकोनॉमिक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन चाहते हैं, मीन्स आप ग्रोथ के ऊपर जाना चाहते हैं, तो आपको एग्रीकल्चर को नंबर 1 प्रायोरिटी पे लाना पड़ेगा। सेकेंडली, अगर आप डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर बात करते हैं और आप पॉवर्टी को रिड्यूस करना चाहते हैं, तो इन पर्टिकुलर एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर जो है वो रूरल डेवलपमेंट के अंदर अपना रोल प्ले करता है। क्योंकि जो रूरल एरियाज हैं वो फार्म एंड नॉन फार्म दोनों जो सेक्टर उसके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है। और उसके बाद जो उसकी लिंकेजेस हैं खासतौर पे अर्बन सेक्टर के साथ वो बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। और पहले 2008 से पहले हमने फॉर ग्रांटेड ले लिया था एग्रीकल्चर को, लेकिन जब 2008 में फूड प्राइसेस ने एस्केलेट किया तो उसके बाद अगेन हमने सोचना शुरू किया कि एग्रीकल्चर को किस तरह से दोबारा से उसके ऊपर पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं वो सोचें और उसको जो इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट है और जो ग्रोथ है उसके अंदर उसको प्रायोरिटाइज करें। और इस वक्त पाकिस्तान में ऑल्दो हमें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में अभी भी ग्रो कर रहे हैं, बट 39% ऑफ द लेबर फोर्स जो है वो इंगेज्ड एग्रीकल्चर में है। ऑल्दो द शेयर इन द GDP इज ऑन द डिक्लाइन, लेकिन अगर हम एग्रीकल्चर की प्रोडक्टिविटी जो है वो इंक्रीज करना चाहते हैं, जिस तरह असद शाह साहब ने कहा, तो उसमें ह्यूमन रिसोर्स जो है वो एग्रीकल्चर में डेवलप करने की जरूरत है। और हमें दोबारा से अपने फार्म्स को जो है वो अट्रैक्टिव बनाना पड़ेगा ताकि एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर इन्वेस्टमेंट आए, जिससे हमारी रूरल डेवलपमेंट हो और जो कि स्पर करेगी अर्बन डेवलपमेंट को। और खासतौर पे जो अर्बन एरिया में इनफॉर्मल जो इकोनॉमी है उसके अंदर एग्रीकल्चर जो है वो बहुत अहम रोल प्ले कर सकता है। बिल्कुल इसमें ह्यूमन रिसोर्स को भी डेवलप होना चाहिए, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप जो है उसको भी डेवलप होना चाहिए। और ख़ास तौर पे पाकिस्तान में जो फार्मर्स हैं, और इस वक्त सिंध के अंदर बहुत ज़्यादा स्कोप है एग्रीकल्चर का, क्योंकि CPAC इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ है, तो उसके लिए ये कॉन्फ्रेंस पॉइंट है खासतौर पे सिंध का जो नॉर्दर्न सिंध का एरिया है। तो इसके लिए एक पॉलिसी इंस्टीट्यूट जो है वो मे बी आप सक्खर में या इसके कोई करीबी इंस्टीट्यूट जो है उसमें आप डेवलप कर सकते हैं, ताकि वो गवर्नमेंट को फैसिलिटेट करे इन द पॉलिसी मेकिंग। और वो पॉलिसी मेकिंग जो है वही इनपुट जो है वो गवर्नमेंट यूज करे और एक कंक्रीट प्लान खास तौर पे एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर के लिए डेवलप करे। सिंध गवर्नमेंट, जिसमें सिंध इन्वेस्टमेंट बोर्ड जो है वो अपना बहुत अहम रोल प्ले कर सकता है। और उसके बाद जो एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट्स हैं, जामशोर में जो यूनिवर्सिटी है, एग्रीकल्चर यूनिवर्सिटी, वो अपना रोल प्ले कर सकती है। सक्खर IBA ने एग्री बिजनेस के अंदर प्रोग्राम्स इंट्रोड्यूस करवाए हैं। ये सब लोग मिलके, और खासतौर पे चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स जो सक्खर का है, वो भी अपना रोल प्ले कर सकता है एग्रीकल्चर डेवलपमेंट के अंदर। और इससे जो सबसे बड़ा फायदा होगा कि इसमें जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट है रिलेटेड टू एग्रीकल्चर, और जो मार्केट्स डेवलपमेंट है इसके अंदर, वो बहुत अच्छे तरीके से उसके ऊपर काम कर सकते हैं।
Thank you, sir. We can go to Sajid Aslam Saab next.
Thank you, Art. I think I'll split my recommendation in two, the one which we can do in the next 12 months, and then I'll go to the little bit midterm, which is more the policy reforms. And that's very specific to Sindh, I would go with. So micro enterprises, I think that's a one opportunity where we can look at the women-led micro enterprises under the public-private partnership and create a market access and specifically opportunity to export, where the government of Sindh can take care of the branding side of it and some of the infrastructure, and the private sector can lead on developing that marketplace and showcase the Sindh and create that direct financial benefit going directly to the producer. So that's a one important area, I would say. Export of service. Export of service is something which can bring very quickly the GDP growth in a different phase. So any policy which is related with the export of services, I would suggest that should be zero rated and incentivized in every medium. Then procurement policy, and include the SME and startups in the procurement side. At least government should fix 10% of their spending and procurement from SMEs and startups, rather than relying on a large organization which have got a very established history. So that's a risk sharing side. I would say the procurement is an important area which can be done in the next 12 months. Agriculture, we have got a major issue of the land sizing. So I think we have to go with the community concept, where we can help the farmer to do the combined procurement side of it and look at the productivity gains and yield. Government of Sindh has already established the budget for certain areas in research and the seed development. I think the productivity gain is something which we should measure against those research, that what is the output we are looking at. In a midterm area, I would suggest that we should look at the overall economic model, looking at the HDI as an indicator rather than only GDP. So Human Development Index is one of a key reference point for us. If we are talking about the growth of GDP, the HDI is an important reference point for us at the same time. And I totally agree with Asad Saab, I totally agree with Bakar Saab, reduction in the tax rates. I think that's one of an important area in a midterm, which we have to look at as an economic policy measure, that how we are going to take it forward. We suggested that 3 years back, the government will end up with a 6 trillion plus borrowing if they do not reduce the tax rates. And we still suggest that the tax rates should be reduced less than 20%, or even if we can bring to somewhere like 15, 16%, that will help us to go for the GDP growth. And that will help us to really attract investments. But above all, that will bring that trust within the Pakistan as an entity where people can come and invest and run that business successfully. Current economic model and the tax framework need to be reviewed and changed. It may not happen in 12 months, but it should not be beyond 24 months from today. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Sajid Saab. We can go to Shaista Aisha next.
Thank you, Ahad. I've just 4 points that I kind of want to focus on. Everybody's been talking about reducing tax rates. Even more important than that, I think it is important to change the conversation around tax. जिन enterprises के साथ हम deal करते हैं, वो small और micro और nano में fall करती हैं. इनको समझ ही नहीं आता कि इनको tax देना क्यों है, या ये formalize क्यों हो. So, simplifying that language and that understanding is very, very important. they need to see evidence कि अगर हम tax दे रहे हैं तो उसके return में उनको मिल क्या रहा है. You know, it's very easy to say कि आप register हो जाएं और आप tax net के अंदर आ जाएं, but unless and until we're able to show with evidence what advantage it is going to give them, we will not be able to convert them in the long run. ठीक है, and we need to really simplify the process. I think ये context में लाना जरूरी है कि आदि enterprises जो operate करती हैं, क्या जो system अभी आया है ये उनके use के लिए आसान है, या do they actually need to be digitally literate to utilize this particular system? The second is, again, we need to focus on skill-based sectors, and in fact, on clusters within Sindh. For instance, आपके handicraft हो गया, या आपकी food industry हो गई, या textile हो गया, education हो गया, and develop these specific clusters with capacity development, interventions, and possible subsidies for these particular sectors. And thirdly, I'd like to say that we need to start developing interventions and programs that focus on the development and nurturing of women-led enterprises within Sindh. And I mean from a rural and an urban perspective, and try and kind of bridge their gap and their access to the market and finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaista. So, our colleagues from Sindh Revenue Board, Mushtaq Kazmi Saab and Abdul Majid Saab, if you have any final comments?
Well, thank you very much. As regards the reduction in the tax rate, as we said that we are for it. The problem is that when the Federation and the other provinces do not follow the suit, we have to give the input tax credit for the taxes paid at the Federation. And if we reduce that input tax credit, then it causes discomfort among the taxpayers. So we will be strongly advocating this thing in the National Tax Council, that all the agencies should do this. And for ease of doing business and for effective tax collection, we have already recommended through the NFC. Unfortunately, the 8th NFC and the 9th NFC didn't see the light of the day, but we are proposing again that the sales tax, all the domestic sales tax, should be transferred to the provinces, and at least the collection side of it, because we have demonstrated that we can do it better than FBR. Number one. Number two, that we are closer to the taxpayer and we are available to them. Number three, we have an effective machinery and a very lean organization to deal with. So there shouldn't be much of show cause notices coming and much of audit notices coming. And we will continue to be a lean organization. That's the thing. As regards retail tax, retail sales tax, that's one issue. It's very unfortunate that in the national income accounts, in the GDP, retail and wholesale is shown under the category services. But the tax at the retail and the wholesale stage, sales tax is collected by the Federation. We have proposed in the NFC that being services, that should be given to the provinces immediately. Not only the collection of it, but even the devolution, the full devolution of the policy also. Because the retailers and the consumers of the retailers, they are there in the provinces. They are not there in Islamabad, all of them. And we are in the close proximity and we can deal with them effectively, which the FBR has consistently failed. As Jabbar Sahab pointed out, the NIC system, introduction of the NIC system and others.
अच्छा थी वही मीटिंग प्लान
जी असद साहब आप कुछ कह रहे हैं जहां तक contribution of Jabbar Sahab and Asad Sahab is concerned, that's known to everyone in the creation of the Sindh Revenue Board, and always they have supported us, and even the Sindh government supports us, and the Other thing which Asad Saab has proposed that's very important in our view, as a person in the province, that there shouldn't be 4 organizations for collecting the tax revenues. It is for the government, unfortunately, because that was the system inherited at the time of independence, and that's continuing in all the 4 provinces. But some decision has to be made at one stage. As regards EOBI, Workers' Welfare Fund, the Workers' Welfare Fund was devolved to Sindh Revenue Board, and we showed that we can collect better. But again, unfortunately, in the CCI, last CCI meeting, it was decided that the Workers' Welfare Fund and the EOBI will continue to be collected by the Federation until and unless the issue is resolved. And the issue was, although it was resolved by the Justice Muni Bakhtar in his judgment, that do it as per the number of the workers in each of the province. But still it is there, and hopefully the next CCI meeting is being called, and we hope that issue will be resolved. And the taxpayer should not be dealing with so many organizations and with so many tax collectors. It should be one organization, whatever it may be, and it should be a lean organization. It should be based on IT rather than going manually for everyone. And the taxpayer should be respected, number one. He should be respected as a taxpayer. So we are there for that policy. And whatever the suggestions from trade industry, we will welcome that. We will welcome always, and we will try to resolve all the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So I think our team noting down the points of this meeting must have a lot of meat which they can actually put into the report that we will be sending off to the federal as well as the provincial government departments relevant to the budget. So some of the most important aspects, I think there needs to be a focus on human capital development. Indigenous product development was discussed. We discussed the micro enterprises and the women-led enterprises development. Of course, I think Sajid Saab's suggestion of creating a marketplace, which is of course backed up by the government, was very welcome. Outcome focused governance. This is again very pertinent because we are actually trying to build policies as well in a very short term basis. So we actually are more planning for projects rather than programs and portfolios rather than going for outcomes and impact. So this is probably very pertinent. Asad Saab, would you like to say something? And of course, I think the most positive thing that we heard today was regarding the MOU that is being signed by all the provincial revenue authorities with the FBR. I think this is
sorry. I think 2 points I want to make. One is the export of services was talked about. That is very critical. And there is a discrimination at the moment because export of goods is taxed at 1%, whereas export of services is taxed at normal rates, So there is no incentive for, and Pakistan is a huge population, and if we develop a service industry, if you look at the countries, actually, those are the countries which are advanced where there is who have good services, really. Is the service economy. UK is a complete service economy, So in the digital economy, services are critical. So I think when you are promoting export of goods, textiles or footballs or, grains or rice, they are all taxed at 1%. Whereas the export of services taxed at the normal rate, it must be equalized. So export of services, only export of services that are rendered abroad are taxed at half the rate. And then the IT-enabled services are exempt. So, I mean, all the services, and these days, actually, there cannot be any services which are not IT enabled. So all services virtually are IT enabled because you need some kind of digital form. So all services should be, services export should be equated with the export of goods, number one. The other point is, I think the entire budgeting must be outcome based. So when you are spending money, there should be outcomes should be defined, with the budgets, both at the federal as well as the provincial level, so that there is clarity and then so that there can be accountability for outcomes. This should be the primary governance and public financial management framework. So these are the two recommendations I would suggest if you could consider incorporating.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a very fruitful discussion, and I'd like to thank you from on behalf of our management as well, Dr. Vakar, Dr. Abid Suleri. We will get back to you with the report as well as any other inputs. I've already shared my email address with you. It's ahad@sdpi.org, and you can send your feedback on the methodology of the meeting that we conducted, as well as any other suggestions with regards to the topic. Thank you very much. With this, we end this meeting. Allah Hafiz.